wait for her. Here we are. Well, I want to welcome everyone to our webinar, Workplace Lessons from the Pandemic, the Pathway Forward. And my name is Thorpe, and I'm a senior consultant at Great Place to Work, and I'll be moderating our panel discussion this morning. I want to begin by welcoming and introducing our panelists. And let me begin with Dr. Rick Smith, who is joining us from the East Coast of the United States. Rick is a professor and vice dean of the Carey School of Business at Johns Hopkins University. And Rick has been really instrumental in helping us put together our 2020 Insights report and prior research that we've done with Rick and his organization. To my right is Evelyn Kwek, the Managing Director of Great Place to Work, ASEAN, Australia, and New Zealand. And next is Naveen Menon. Naveen is the President of Southeast Asia for Cisco. And to his right, Lekha George, the Head of People and Communication, ASEAN and Korea for Cisco. Cisco is the co-presenting partner of our 2020 Insights report, Trust Enables New Ways to Work. And we appreciate Cisco hosting the webinar in their office here in Singapore. While there are some people attending the session in person, many of you are remote. And so this is kind of a real life, real time example of working in the hybrid workplace. And so we, again, appreciate being able to do this live, although it's kind of interesting for many of us who have been doing a number of webinars from the comfort of our homes. To be live is a bit different these days. So let me also congratulate Cisco on quite an outstanding year from a recognition standpoint. Cisco was selected as the 2020 World's Best Workplace globally from more than 10,000 companies. They're number one on our Fortune 100 Best Companies to Work For, and number two on our Singapore Best Workplaces for 2020. So it's been quite a stellar year and some well-earned recognition under very challenging circumstances. And we'll learn more about what's the secret in the sauce during our session.
It's good to hear live clapping.
Everybody just wave your hands. Our agenda for the session. We'll do a brief introduction to a Great Place to Work and talk about the highlights from our 2020 Insights research and learnings. We'll spend the majority of our time in our panel discussion on the path forward. And we'll also have time for the audience Q&A. So again, feel free to type any questions you might have into the Q&A box on your WebEx screen. And now let me turn it over to Evelyn Kwek to introduce us to Great Place to Work and our 2020 Insights research.
Right, thank you, Tyler, thank you everyone. I want to first just thank Cisco for partnering with us in this research paper and for hosting us in this beautiful office. In the state-of-the-art, room like this, where we're all speaking and the mics are just picking us up our voices. So that's really great. The reality is Great Place to Work and Cisco. We have a long and deep partnership, not just in Singapore but globally. And really, I think I speak on behalf of my colleagues around the world. We value this partnership with Cisco. So thank you for having us here this morning. And Great Place to Work. Who are we? As the name suggests, we are the global authority on workplace culture. What we do is that we help companies to quantify their culture and with that produce better business results because of the focus on creating a high trust workplace experience for the employees. And what we do really is that we have a validated survey model that does this. Globally, we recognize Great Place to Work certified companies and best workplaces in 97 countries around the world. On to the next slide, you will see that this is a list of the 2020 Singapore best workplaces, of which Cisco is ranked number 2. Great Place to Work take pride, in a very rigorous process in which we select our best workplaces. We are very confident that these companies, every one of them, their employees will say they work in a great workplace. The reason is because we have a rigorous process in which companies are selected based on employees' feedback on their workplace experience that we curate based on their responses on a Great Place to Work survey too. So we are happy to recognize these companies, and we have a rigorous process that not only measures employees' experience, but also to evaluate companies' responses on what they do in the workplace to build strong people culture. In the year 2020, we adapted our survey, our cultural audit methodology, in which we asked companies like Cisco to tell us, because of the pandemic, what were some bold acts of leadership that you did in response to COVID-19 to create a great place to work experience for all people in the community and in the world? And based on those experiences, we created this best workplaces list. And therefore, for last year's study, when we worked with Rick, in which we have Rick come and share with us a little bit more of the study. Tyler, if you go on to the next slide. We had, in a difficult year, over 24,000 employees respond to our survey across companies, across industries in Singapore. And this mainly happened after the circuit breaker period. These people responded to the survey on 60 survey items based on our Great Place to Work survey model. If we could have Rick, if you could share with us, what were some things that you saw in the survey? We know that for one, there were great improvements in the 2020 survey scores over 2019. But if you could share with us a little more insight as to what you see and how we are confident that the survey results are valid.
Yes, happy to do so. Thank you, Evelyn, and it's great to be here with you today. I've been working with Great Place to Work in Asia for almost 6 years, I think, and in that time, I've gotten to, understand some of the results. And this past year, as the results were coming in and the data began to mount, I said, oh, this is going to be awful. This is an awful year. We have nothing but bad things happening in society, in our communities, and the workplaces. We've been disrupted. And I just can't imagine the results. And I thought there was something wrong, but as we looked at the data, everything was better. Now, not everything, but so many things had improved across the board, whether it was Great Places to Work and other companies, but across the board, Singapore companies rallied. And this was such a powerful thing, and we'll get into a little bit of some of the findings, but that's really the first thing that we noticed. The second thing I want to mention is wow, managers have really dug deep and made things happen this past year. But we also recognize that Singapore, in a lot of ways, is a great litmus test for the entire region. You see, for the last several years, we've been surveying and looking at all the data all across Asia. This past year, that wasn't exactly possible in the same format. So we looked at Singapore really as a sampling, if you will, across Asia. And so I think what we're seeing really across the region, particularly in ASEAN, is the great rallying between businesses, employees, to adjust quickly and make things happen. And we'll get into more of that in the detail, but just a striking result. And 24,000 surveys later, we're really interested to dig deeper and understand the implications for the future.
Wonderful. Thank you, Rick. Well, as Rick mentioned, and we saw improvements across our workplaces in comparison with 2019. And that, I think, is a real testament to organizations needing to be very planful and intentional in their communications with employees. And so we acknowledge that. And yet we also, as we looked at the data, found some areas of difference for our best workplaces. Where did our best workplaces excel as compared with the rest? And you can see here 5 of those key differences for best workplaces. The first key difference for best workplaces was the strength of the workplace culture and related practices that they had prior to the pandemic. Our best workplaces were able to draw positive energy from their organization culture by leveraging the trust that they had built with their employees over time. This trust also enabled the agility to quickly adjust to the new conditions created by the crisis. Second, our best workplaces have inclusive leadership practices that create psychological safety and promote a sense of belonging. This allows people to feel more comfortable trying new things, sharing their ideas, offering feedback. Third, our best workplaces had strong practices in place to share information and provide updates with transparency. They focused on the big picture and solicited feedback and input from employees to better understand their concerns and challenges during very uncertain and dynamic times. They also created forums to listen to their employees regularly through surveys, town halls, one-on-one meetings. But it didn't stop with listening. Best workplaces also shared what they learned. They acted on employee feedback in a timely manner. It informed and helped them adjust their practices and approaches and respond to the varied and changing circumstances. Fourth, holistic wellness. Our best workplaces support the overall well-being of their employees and demonstrate care in many different ways, while still needing to ensure the continuity of business operations. Our best workplaces were attentive to employees' physical and environmental safety, job and financial security, psychological and emotional needs. Often, this support was extended to employees' families as well. And finally, leaders of best workplaces demonstrated humility, humanity, and honesty in caring for their employees, customers, vendors, and their broader communities. Best workplaces prepared their leaders not to be superheroes, but to show vulnerability, demonstrate empathy, and encourage resilience in themselves and their teams. So these key differences are based on our best workplace practices in response to the pandemic. But the next question quickly became, how do we build on these learnings as organizations move forward and on this path to the new normal? And so we have a few areas for the leadership agenda ahead. And those include building trust by continuing to focus on leader behaviors, two-way communication, and creating psychological safety that models and reinforces trust between managers, team members, and direct reports. Fostering reinvention, which requires inclusive leadership and active teamwork, as well as creating engaging hybrid workspaces that stimulate creativity and collaboration. Investing in employee wellness through a holistic framework that supports job and financial security, encourages work-life balance, provides fulfillment in one's work, and builds strong interpersonal relationships. And finally, creating a great workplace for all, so that an organization brings out the best in all of its employees, no matter who they are, what they do, or where they're working. And these are the themes we'd like to begin to address and speak to with our panelists right now. So, we have a few questions to begin our discussion, and then we'd like to take the questions from the audience. So again, please submit any questions you might have in the Q&A box on your WebEx screen. And let me begin with a question for Naveen. You may unmask now, sir. So as president of Cisco for Southeast Asia, and as you hear these themes, how do they resonate with what you see in workplaces across the region?
Well, I see that, the culture at Cisco resonates with all of those points that you mentioned. I mean, if I just look straight to the top, I mean, Chuck Robbins, our CEO, demonstrates tremendous humility in everything, in every communication, and tremendous empathy. When COVID sort of started to be an issue around the world, he demonstrated commitment to the employees as well, because we didn't announce any redundancies or layoffs for over a year, I think. And that commitment basically to individuals and their families was very, very well received. The other thing is we had regular communication. And in this communication, and we all took part in them, it was clear that we could see that something special was going on, something was going on. And the leadership team themselves looked uncomfortable, but they were leading with purpose. And that was quite an impressive point of view, because when you're sitting back here in Singapore and you're looking at the US, you're sort of expecting, in some ways, you're expecting them to have all the answers. And then on the other hand, you start looking at them going as individuals and you say, well, they really don't know, but they're trying. And it's amazing the amount of dialogue that we had we used to connect every couple of weeks, sometimes every month. And the dialogue was very honest and was very real. And so it felt, the commitment to the company, to individuals and families was really there. It was really authentic. The other thing is I realized that lots of innovation popped up all over the place. Like, for instance, I think somewhere around the world, we talked about mental health at home. And because people are in confined spaces. That became a big movement worldwide to have a conversation about mental health. And actually, it was interesting because the dichotomy between what we're exposed to in Cisco about there's the lack of stigma around mental health is not necessarily what you experience at home with your spouse or with your children or your extended family, because they may not be exposed to the same environment. Hence, the conversation can be asymmetric at times. Like you may see your own mental health challenges, and you may recognize mental health challenges in your family, but your family may not recognize them as equally as you do. And so it creates also a ripple effect in families and communities. So that was the other thing that I thought was very, innovative in a way. And then the last thing was, I had people in my team come to me and say, well, let's try this. And one of them was, we spend so much time on WebEx calls. Why don't we spend one day where we actually either don't do the calls or we just focus on our customers. We strip all external meetings away. So, okay, that's a great idea. Let's try it. I don't know whether it's a success or not. I still feel like we spend a lot of time on calls, but at least the idea came, and it was a great idea. And I think this kind of innovation within the workforce is really a testament to the culture of the company. So I was really impressed with that as well. So it comes right from the top all the way through. And I think that's the difference with really world-class organizations, is that you may see, in some organizations, you may see some activity happening somewhere. In others, you may see the activity happening at the top. But it really is telling when it goes the whole way through the organization. And that's what I see at Cisco.
And what strikes me there is also it sounded spontaneous.
Yeah.
It wasn't like, okay, we're going to announce that everyone should now be innovative and let's instead.
It wasn't prescriptive that way. It was very spontaneous and very organic. And I think it comes from that humility, that like you said, that vulnerability of the leadership to say, I don't know, but we're gonna get through this together.
Wonderful, wonderful. Lekha, I have a question for you. As workplaces move to hybrid work arrangements, what can organizations do to sustain and adapt their workplace cultures so that they continue to be meaningful and relevant for all employees, regardless of their work location?
So Tyler, I think that's a really relevant and a pertinent question, especially as you see, across countries are scrambling around to address the fallout and the aftermath of the pandemic. And you see countries trying to get growth back in terms of, for the economy. And I think during the pandemic, what companies really saw, and as Naveen mentioned as well, and what came out from your insights, I think companies really learned the necessity and also the value of staying very close to their employees and communicating with them, having those clear, direct communication channels. They also saw the value of inclusive and compassionate leadership. And the third, I would say, is around building trust and credibility. So, and as we move into a hybrid sort of a working arrangement, with employees working from different places and working across different mechanisms, I think it is, in my perspective, it is continuing to do more of the same. And it's really trying to remain true to the similar principles. And if you ask me, it is doing three things over and over again. One is in terms of building trust, fostering respect, and ensuring fairness in the organization. Two is in terms of building an inclusive leadership. And three is in terms of active communication and listening. So if I look at building trust, that comes across when outcomes are valued, rather than looking at how long somebody stays online, or how long somebody comes in and clocks into the office. Second is in terms of providing that kind of a collaborative environment, whether it is via technology or also within the teams, and ensuring that there is a sense of employees playing to their strengths and really working from that perspective. And the third, when we look at building trust, it's about offering flexibility to employees, because we are in this unique situation now where everybody comes from different places. They have unique situations, they have unique needs at home and also from a work perspective. So building trust, ensuring fairness is really key. The second, from my perspective, is about that authentic and inclusive leadership. And that gets demonstrated by leaders truly understanding what the needs of their employees are and being empathetic to that, and giving the sense of confidence to employees that they have their backs, and creating that through their authentic communication, which we saw in the pandemic as well, really demonstrating that care and concern. So that's number two. And number three is the active communication that you spoke about, from the insights that you got from the GPTW as well, and Naveen spoke about how Cisco saw that play out during the times of the pandemic. So it's really about keeping close to employees. It's about keeping those channels of communication open and active and cutting across. So having different mechanisms of communication. I think Naveen spoke about how in Cisco we had employee check-ins that we did on a bi-weekly basis during pandemic, and now it is on a monthly basis, but keeping that, as well as having channels open even at the regional level or the country level or at the team level. So making sure that those active channels of communication are there, and truly listening to employees, listening to what is it that is working well, not working well, and being nimble and agile enough to do something about it quickly. So in summary, those are the three things I think from a workplace culture perspective that we need to do. Building trust, second is about inclusive leadership, and third is about active communication.
Thank you. Evelyn, anything to add as you think about our experience across organizations here in Singapore and more broadly?
Yeah, I was just thinking to what Naveen talked about, the fact that what is different in Cisco was that consistency of experience at a very senior level and at a very junior level. I think that's what we see in terms of what distinguishes the best from the great from the good, right? And that the great work at it very relentlessly. They go at it again and again and again to make sure that it's a consistent experience regardless of your role, your gender, whatever work you do, whether in Indonesia, in Singapore, in Philippines. And if there are audience out there, I know that some of the people out there, you're looking at building strong workplace culture. What they say does not seem to be rocket science. Inclusive leadership, two-way communication, we heard it till death. But what is it that make it that Cisco is great and company B might just be good? Is that relentless perseverance going at it to make sure that the leadership lives it out, the media level lives it out, and the people at the very last level get to experience that in a very real way. So this is just my observation.
Thank you. Thank you. Next question back to Naveen. And Rick, I'll bring you in on this one as well. As workplaces move to hybrid work environments, what can leaders do to continue to build trust and demonstrate inclusive leadership? I think about the momentum that we have coming out of, response to the pandemic and the urgency of that. And all of a sudden that kind of urgency starts to fade. And how do we engage?
There is a term for that, languishing. This new article that Evelyn talked about it, right?
Yeah.
The surge of energy is over in the last year, and now it's how do we go on? We can't be on that high for so long. And what do I do in this languishing state? I thought that was a great article.
It was.
Yeah. Rick is smiling. I'm sure he's got something to add on to that.
Sure, Rick, do you want to join in? We're at it.
Yeah, I think Adams Grant's article in the New York Times hit a lot of chords. This, languishing. It's like, oh yeah, that's what I'm feeling. It's like this, burnout, but I'm still pumped with adrenaline and going, but I'm just tired of this. And can we get back? And for those of you that don't know me, I lived in Singapore. In fact, I did the circuit breaker in Singapore, and I was languishing for sure, and. For sure. And I think, but I think what's powerful as we get back to the new work and the new hybrid is, how do we keep the lessons that we've learned and keep the things that we've done so well when we go back? And will we, revert back, and will we relax, to our old ways? And so some of the things that I've seen organizations do with these checking in, so checking in with people, how many times did we do that when we were in the physical office? Chances are we're kind of on task. It's like, hey, we need to get this done today. Oh, by the way, how you doing? Right. And I think in this virtual environment, we've been taking care a little bit more. And I get a lot more messages, I'm sure you do, is like, is everything okay where you are? I haven't talked to you in a while. How are you doing? And could we incorporate some of those interpersonal check-ins as a normal course of business? And what we're finding is that those little nuances are really creating a difference in the way that leaders are leading more inclusively. And they're connecting with people, and this, humanity, connection that we've talked about, so we're on calls, we're on the WebExes or other versions of WebEx with, dogs and kids and other things. And I think there's just a nice humanity that we've created. And it would be a shame to go back to this kind of professional polish without having that human connection. And so I think the way we can try to keep this trust and this connection is really powerful, but it's going to be really hard because we're languishing, right? So I think if we can do a little bit of adjustment to how we embrace the physical world again and the physical connection with others, I think that's great. If we can bring some of this, I need to connect with people at a human level back, I think, that's great. And I think the real challenge that we have going forward is the hybrid. How do we make sure, as we have people on site, off site, working virtually, that we're really inclusive? And I think that's one of the challenges we have probably yet to face as we go forward.
Thanks, Rick. It strikes me, another piece of this, I'll say from my own experience, there's kind of authentic interest. It wasn't like that, okay, first thing you do on your one-on-one meeting is check in and say, how are you? Okay, now let's move on to business. It was like, really, it was like we all had such different experiences. It was like whether someone was a parent of young children or home alone, without exposure to others frequently. So the experiences were very different. Naveen, let me come back to you on this. So for you personally as a leader, are you concerned about, okay, how do I continue this this momentum?
Yeah, I am. I'm just picking up on what Rick was saying as well. Like, I am, obviously. I mean, we don't know what we don't know. So there's a lot of things that we don't know about the future that we're not even ready for accepting in our own minds. But what we know right now is that there's going to be a hybrid workforce. And this hybrid workforce, there's two elements to this hybrid workforce. There's the element of secure remote work, right, where you're working remotely, whether it's at home or in a cafe or in a park. And then there's an element of returning to the office. Now, in this return to the office and secure remote work kind of environments, you need to have human experiences, right? And either way, when you are at the return to the office like we are right now, the human experience is obviously elevated because we have some physical connection. But I'm sort of missing, emotionally some of my team. Like I look around, I'm really happy to see so many people here. But there's another half that I'm missing. There's every second seat is empty, and so you're sort of halfway there, halfway not. And with the secure remote work end, you're still staring at a two-dimensional screen, whether it's a laptop or not, and you're chatting maybe online, or you're maybe scheduling for meetings, and you're clicking from meeting to meeting. I work at home with a Desk Pro, which is one of these great devices, Cisco WebEx devices, which basically allows me to click from meeting to meeting. But then I realized after about 6 hours, I haven't gotten up yet, and I'm really lucky to kind of be able to have helpers like my children around me. Have some water, please. And so it's like that can't be good for your back. That can't be good for your mental health. It can't be good for anything. So there is there's something about being human at home and working securely remotely, but also productively. And there's something about human experiences at the workplace, which are also different now, that we need to embrace. And that is the challenge right now. And I do think, actually, and I don't mean this as kind of a sales pitch, but I do think technology can enable both of those environments to a very, very high degree. And one of our ambitions with WebEx actually is to make real life, to make virtual meetings 10 times more effective than real life meetings. That's almost an aspiration in itself, right? I mean, can you imagine if your virtual meeting is even more effective than your physical meeting?
Mm-hmm.
So that's something to think about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it makes me think the kind of spontaneity that we might have if we all get together in a room versus kind of the thinking about what are the dynamics, what are the things we want to do as people are in a hybrid situation.
Right.
A couple of years ago, we couldn't have Rick join us like that.
What's that?
A couple of years ago, we couldn't have Rick join us in this way.
Yeah.
We had to fly how many hours? 18 hours from New York to Singapore. And after this, he can go to bed. So this already is an advancement.
although Rick's working at 9 o'clock, 9:30 his time.
I just to mildly correct you there. That's one of the reasons why I joined Cisco, that I could do meetings like this.
Is that right?
Because I was in a different organization 4 years ago, and I was traveling all over the place, and I was spending more nights on a plane. Like it got to the point where I spent more nights on a plane in a week than I did spend nights in a hotel. So it was like, the beginning of my career, I'd count like, did I spend 5 nights?
1131A.
Right. And so it got out of control. So I wanted to actually spend more time working at home, which is why I joined Cisco. So 4 years ago, we did have this, but not all of the world was doing this. Right. I think that's the difference
That's
as
a
well.
big shift.
Yeah, that's great. And Naveen, I'm going to put a copyright on, you kind of talked about every other seat, and I'm thinking like we also see only half the face, and so we're kind of in this halfway world, right? It's kind of like, Lekha, I have a question. The pandemic drove many organizations to prioritize the importance of employee well-being. And, with the vaccines, the relaxing of workplace restrictions, the urgency and priority may decrease. And so why should organizations continue to be committed to this kind of concept of holistic wellness? And are there any particular practices that you think that you'll be focusing on as you look forward?
So Tyler, I think that's a great question. And if I just zoom out a little bit and look at where we are in the world, the spread of the pandemic and also the recovery is so different across different countries. Countries are having different rates of bouncing back. They're having different launches of the vaccination programs. And, it is so varied. And if I just look across the ASEAN region, for instance, you have countries like Malaysia, Vietnam, you have countries like Malaysia, Indonesia, Philippines, and Thailand, who are having incidences in the few thousands every day. But whereas if you look across at Vietnam and Singapore, it is, it is relatively better. So countries are in this different, have different experiences when it comes to the pandemic and also trying the aftermath of the pandemic. And if I just recall the words of our Singapore Prime Minister Lee and our Singapore Minister Lawrence Wong, what they said was we cannot afford to let our guard down in the fight against the COVID-19 outbreak, and we need to be always vigilant. Now, while there are some countries, yes, where there are relaxation of restrictions, etc., I think we are a long way off from, let's say, being 100% at work. We are also a long way off from the days of pre-pandemic. So it really then means for organizations that employees all are at different levels as well in terms of challenges and in terms of the situations they face. You have caregiving needs, you have employees with young children, you have employees with extended families in other countries that might be going through struggles with the pandemic, and they need to be providing assistance, care, even if it is remotely. So just given that there are so many different experiences across the spectrum, I think organizations have to continue to focus on holistic wellness. And that means then it's not just about physical, but it's also about the psychological, it's about the financial wellness, it's about the social wellness. So it's really encompassing all aspects of it. And I just think that even if, let's say, life goes back to being, a little bit better, but there is still uncertainty. there are still disruptions. I can give you a case. Just yesterday, there was a meeting that I was supposed to have with a colleague that got cancelled because he got a call from his daughter's school saying, hey, come and pick up your daughter because she's running fever. And there are implications of that. There are implications of going to the hospital, going to get tested. So he has to drop his work and tend to that. So we will continue to see disruptions. We will continue to see uncertainties. And that's so much the reason and the justification for us to continue to look at holistic wellness and address that. And coming to your question in terms of what is it that in the practices that we can have, I think there are a few different things that we can do. Active communication and listening is one of them. Really being able to understand what our employees' needs, what are the situations they're at. Like I can give an example of Cisco where we've implemented this practice of it was virtual at that time, and now I think it'll be hybrid, but a virtual health check-in, which means you don't go straight to an agenda. You do check in with employees to see where they are at. And you have dedicated meetings that just talk about not work, but about employee wellness and how the teams are doing. So that's going to be really critical. Listening to employees and being very, very agile in terms of how we can address some of the concerns that are coming up. So that's one. Second is in terms of the people focus. And that can be at different levels, at the individual level, where we are being responsive and understanding of wellness and employee state of mind. And second is in terms of teams, making sure that teams have this shared sense of purpose and clarity on priorities, because that then reduces uncertainty as well for employees. And then at an organization level, looking at different things that can be done from a wellness perspective. And if I just look at Cisco as example, we've implemented a few different things, and like Naveen said, we've tried things and things work, which is great. So we have what we call a recovery leave for employees who, if they go for vaccinations and they feel the aftermath of it with a fever, we allow employees to take time off without adding to their annual leave, and for people to recover. We've had emergency time off given to employees to take care of their families and to take care of situations, again, not adding to annual leave. We've had days for me, what we call days for me, where we've given time off to all staff, employees and contractors to really focus on themselves, because it can get so overwhelming at times. So we've done different things from that perspective, trying to demonstrate care and support for employees. And then if I just look at what was mentioned about psychological safety, this is something that, as an example in Cisco, we've done it before the pandemic as well. We've created a community called Safe Space to Talk, because we recognize that employees are struggling, and sometimes you just need to be heard. Sometimes you just need to be supported. So we do have that community where people can have that safe space in which they can share and they can get access to resources as well. And then finally, I would say having wellness programs. And I can take the example of ASEAN, where we've launched an ASEAN wellness program, where we get subject matter experts to come in and share advice and tips on all those different aspects of wellness, whether that is physical, psychological, financial, or social. So these are the different ways where I think organizations need to keep in mind and tackle and address holistic wellness.
Thank you. Thank you. Kind of one last prepared question for our panelists, and we'll make this kind of perhaps a one or two line response, and then we'll move to questions from the audience. Is there anything we haven't talked about? And Rick, let's start with you. Is there anything we haven't talked about, or that particularly resonates with you as you think about building on the lessons from the pandemic to enable strong workplace cultures going forward?
Yeah, I think this concept of building in agility and flexibility, and so I would say, how do we step back from this, take the lessons forward around resilience? So can we create pandemic resilient and pandemic proof organizations going forward. And I think that would be a great challenge for all of us to think about.
And I'm interpreting that too, whether it's pandemic related or other crises, or hopefully they're whatever. This is the only crisis we need to deal with at one at a time. But great, Evelyn, how about you?
I think for me, it's this idea of great place for all. The reality is not everyone is at that same speed of adoption of technology. Not everyone is equally comfortable with access to technology, and really, how do the rest of us who might perhaps be a little bit ahead to bring them along, on this ride, so that the gap between those who are able to thrive in a hybrid working world is not going to be widened between those who are more agile and flexible and those who might be less comfortable doing that. I think we need to give more thought to it. A lot about technology, but not enough to how do we bring people forward with us.
Naveen?
Yeah, for me, I would like to highlight, when we talk about workplaces, where we've been talking predominantly about office-based cultures, there are many, many, many workplaces that do not require you working in an office. And so there are many challenges to solve in those environments. So for example, what if you are a farmer working in an agricultural institution? You can't just work in an office. What if you are an airline attendant? What if you are a hotel staff? What if you are a teacher in a school? Or what if you work in an environment like a manufacturing environment where you need to assemble parts and goods? Now, if you're not there, production stops. So there's a lot that we need to think about enabling those kind of workplaces as well, so that those employees can be included in the economy. It's about inclusion because they are putting their lives at risk potentially, or their own health at risk, in order to support an organization. Could be a government, it could be a company, a private company, but employees are doing that every day. And so I think we should also look at how to enable the non-office based environments as well.
From the research we've done, they say somewhere around 40 to 50% of the workforce has opportunities to do things like work remotely.
Yeah.
And so it really is only a half. Lekha.
So for me, I think it is about this piece about looking at the larger community and what we can do as collectives, whether it's organizations, companies, how we can reach out and make a difference and make a significant impact in the communities as well. I mean, we see the news all around us. There's so much that we can do in our own ways, whether it is at an individual level or a company level. So for me, it is looking at how we can extend that helping hand in the communities.
That makes me think that one of the things I think also stood out for our best workplaces is that they really find value and are committed to their kind of connection with the broader communities in which they're part of and in which they work. And so it's something that that employees also appreciate, that connection and that commitment to the broader community. So how do we bring those who aren't necessarily in a work environment like this into that conversation? Wonderful. I want to take a few minutes now to open the floor to some questions from our audience. And I was going to start perhaps with anyone here in the room that might have a question for the panel.
Yeah, I do have a question for.
Yes, sir.
I do have a question for Naveen and Lekha. I would love to hear your thoughts on two particular groups of people in this new normal working environment. I think work from home is good if you've been in an organization for a while. People know you, they know the quality of your work. So the first group is really the new joiners. Right? If either I'm a fresh graduate coming to join Cisco or I'm a mid-career person joining Cisco, I'm now getting less face time. Right? How do you ensure that less face time does not equate to less opportunities? Right? Because I can't shun. Right? The second group that I'm really looking at is underperformers. Right? As with every organization, there will be underperformers. As great a workplace as Cisco is, I'm sure you have them too. The last year, as Naveen has said, Cisco hasn't laid off anybody. So how and when do we start transitioning into managing the workforce? How do we manage underperformance in the workforce?
What do you go?
Yeah, sure. So I was actually smiling when I heard your question because we have a perfect example of new joiners joining in this uncertain times, right? We've taken some trainees from the SG United program, and we've had all of them join virtually. And the challenge for us was, how do we make that a truly inclusive experience for them, and how do we welcome them with open arms and make them feel part of the company? And we worked really hard to do that and create an orientation, talk about company culture and all of that, getting the mindset of leaders, with leaders sharing their career journeys. And yes, I mean, you don't have the live interactions like how we have now. And we have to really truly work hard at it. But I think that's a challenge for us to be then more innovative and address those issues. So I saw that working really well, and I saw the difference as when they came in and they went to being really engaged, and they went to being. We saw the visible difference actually, and it was funny because we commented about that. We saw that real transformation take place. So that's one example that I can give.
Has there been anybody who's joined during COVID that you haven't met face to face yet?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. We've had processes where we've had to deliver and ship the laptops and make sure they have all the setup. But there are some teams that haven't met face to face. So it's truly strange times. The second one, in terms of the performance, that's where I would say that it's very key that we focus on outcomes, and we don't look at how many hours somebody has been online or how many hours somebody clocks in when they come into office. It's about making really clear the kind of priorities that employees have, and then working towards that together between the leader and the employee. And if there is, let's say, underperformance, it comes through from the outcomes, because you're having an outcome-based conversation, and hence then your focus would be on how to ensure that those outcomes and those gaps in performance can improve. So that's what I would say. We have a tool called TeamSpace that we use pretty effectively, and that's the way in which we have weekly check-ins between the employee and the leader to understand what those priorities are, and that forms a trigger for conversations during the week about priorities. And these priorities need not necessarily, by the way, be work related. It could even be development related, could be personal related. Naveen, I'll ask you to chime in.
Yeah, I was just trying to think what I could add to that. I think the only thing I would add to that is, yes, it is very, very difficult to onboard new employees you've never physically met. It's also very difficult to hire them. That it's obviously very difficult to hire people you've never met. But one thing I'd say is that in Cisco, we have a very strong emphasis on inclusion. And inclusion is a very complex topic because it's not the same as diversity, right? In diversity, you can actually measure, right? Inclusion, you can't really measure. And the way I describe inclusion is, for example, it could be, to me, it's around share of voice, right? To me, it's about whether you are involved in your team, in your environment, in your conversation, or in the decision-making process. And in order to help and drive real sustainable improvement in inclusion, you need to increase the share of voice of underrepresented groups in your team. And how do you do that? Well, it's very difficult because how many times have you been in a meeting where there are 12 people in the meeting, but 3 people are only talking?
Yeah.
Right? And that happens all the time. Whether you're in the office or in a WebEx call, it happens all the time. So inclusion is really about recognizing that, like sitting at the table and going, firstly, oh my God, these 3 people are always talking. But it's also about going, what does that say about me? Right? So what do I say? How do I show up? right? So you should ask yourself the question: if you are the nine that's not talking, what do I do? And then it's for you as a leader. If you're leading that team, it's for you as a leader to look at that and go, why am I the only person talking here? You know, and then opening up opportunities for others to engage. Now, I tell you, human beings are notoriously bad at that, which is why, in our portfolio, in the WebEx roadmap, we are opening up a space, like the technology will allow you to identify those who are speaking more than others during a call, and will open up an opportunity. It's called Roundtable. So it's in WebEx, it's called Roundtable, and you actually open up an opportunity to invite someone into a conversation. So to me, it's about inclusion. So whether you are on a screen or not, whether you physically met or not, may not be the problem. The problem may be if you join, you're too afraid to speak up because you're new. So how can you create a more inclusive experience for that employee? And that's a human problem, but it can also be partially, I think, maybe even mostly addressed with technology.
Thanks, Naveen. Speaking of inclusion, let me, Rick, we've done quite a bit of research in the last couple of years about inclusion and the concept of belonging. Anything to add briefly?
Yeah, I think this idea of inclusion has been really, brought to the forefront through the pandemic. And I think, more and more organizations are practicing inclusive activities. One of the things we've noticed from the research over the years with Great Place to Work is that it's, really a combination of looking at, psychological safety. How do we create an environment that's safe for everyone? And by doing that, we have at least a fighting chance of then getting, a more inclusive environment. This also helps create a level of teamwork, which is, really important, especially in a virtual environment. But the tricky part is, if we go far enough with inclusiveness, how do we foster a sense of belonging? And Tyler and I kind of say that this is two sides of the same coin. So, at an employer standpoint, we can create inclusiveness. From an employee standpoint, do they feel a sense of belonging? To me, that if we get that right, that's incredible. If we can get that right in a virtual remote environment, that's great. So hats off to the managers who are making that happen.
Wonderful, thank you. So we've got a couple minutes left, and so let me begin to close out our conversation. And I want to first bring your attention to those of you who might have interest in learning more about our 2020 Insights research. You can find the report, Trust Enables New Ways to Work, and download that from our greatplacetowork.com.sg website. We're also excited to announce a new best workplace list here in Singapore, which is the Singapore Best Workplaces in Technology. And this is a list that we hope to anticipate rolling out sometime in November of this year. And so for those who are joining us online, if you're interested in being considered for that list, feel free to reach out and connect with us again at our website, greatplacetowork.com.sg. And in closing, I want to thank Rick and Evelyn, and Naveen, and Lekha for joining us today. I want to congratulate all of you at Cisco for your selection as #1 on the world's best workplace list. That is not, I'll say, as Evelyn said, there's kind of a long history here. And what does it mean? It means that, you just kind of keep it on, if you will, from one year to the next. And this last year, I think, as we've talked about, has really provided us with opportunities to demonstrate more kind of agility. Okay, this is the way we did it before. How are we going to do it now? But that really building and tapping into that foundation of trust between employees, their workplace, their managers, their leaders, is a place that enables us to draw on during the more challenging times. So any last comments in closing? Anyone on the panel?
Go ahead.
No, thank you very much for our partnership, and obviously my thanks to the Cisco leadership and the Cisco team, because obviously you cannot get to #1 great workplace in the world without the absolute commitment, but also the work that the team in around the world in Cisco does, especially here now that we're in Singapore. I'm really grateful to work for this great company, and especially because of the team and the environment that I feel at work every day. That's what keeps me here. So I just wanted to say thanks to the employees of Cisco.
Wonderful.
No, that's hard too. Yeah, I also would like to acknowledge that the recognition comes because our employees have recognized us.
Mhm.
Because it's the employees, each one of the individuals, who truly validate and applaud the company as a best place to work. So I am humbled by that, and I know that we have to continue our efforts in trying to be agile and innovative, and how we keep making this a really great employee experience.
The job is never done.
Yes.
So thanks all to everyone for your interest. We wish you all success in your efforts to become great places to work for all as we step out into this new halfway world of the new pathway forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, dear participants, thank you for attending this session. This session was hosted by Learning Services, your trusted learning partner. If you wish to engage our service or want more information, please contact us at ls-engage@cisco.com. Thank you so much for your time. Have a great rest of the day. Stay home, stay safe. Bye-bye.